No plan survives first contact. So in the military, you're going to have a battle plan, whether it's tactical or a strategic plan. But as soon as that first shot's fired, that plan is going to go out the window. Nothing is going to happen exactly like you planned it. But if you've put forth the effort into the planning process, you're able to adjust more quickly and more seamlessly than you would if you didn't go through the mental gymnastics to get that plan done.
It is a common saying amongst real estate investors that you make money when you buy, not when you sell. While this catchy phrase has value, it fails to convey how easy it is to lose money through poor property management. Whether you self-manage or hire a professional, it is important to understand how to navigate the common pitfalls and challenges with rental properties without losing your shirt or your mind. That's why you have tuned in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. I'm your host, John Stiles, real estate agent and team leader of the VIP Real Estate Group at Bridge Realty. As a current multifamily investor and former property manager myself, I understand the headaches and difficulties of keeping an investment property from becoming a money pit and time sucker. It takes a solid business plan, it takes tested systems, and it takes key team members to actually find success. So let's take a deep dive and maximize your property value. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Maximizing Your Property Value. I'm your host, John Stiles with Bridge Realty, and I'm so thankful that you have joined us today. I think you're in for a real treat. Today, I am pleased to introduce to you our guest, who is Brian Briscoe. Brian, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. And just a little bit about Brian. He is the principal and founding member of the real estate investment firm Four Oaks Capital, LLC. He is also a lieutenant colonel in the United States Marine Corps and brings years of leadership and management experience to his real estate investments. As a Marine officer, he has proven his ability to plan, lead, and effectively accomplish missions in both training and combat situations. He has earned graduate degrees from both the University of Utah and Naval Postgraduate School and is currently stationed at the Pentagon. He has actively invested in the real estate since 2007. Brian is an advisor in Michael Blanc's Deal Maker Mastermind and a member of Michael's Elite Investor Club. So, great experience. And by the way, thank you for your service to our country. I
appreciate that.
Yeah. Can you fill in the audience a little bit more about your background, how you got into real estate investing?
So once upon a time, I wanted to be a college professor, and kind of was going through the process. I actually was going to school not far from where you're located, at the University of Minnesota, starting a PhD program in math. And at the time, the World Trade Center went down, so that very much disrupted the world, as most people know. But for me, I was already a reservist. And for me, that decision or that event kind of catapulted my active duty career. Decided to go active duty. And somewhere, my first duty station, I was in Okinawa, Japan. I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I didn't grow up in a wealthy household. We had our basic needs met. Okay, we never had a lack. But we didn't have bells and whistles. So picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad once, and it really resonated with me. I thought, what, these are a lot of the things that that I had learned. So when Rich Dad compares his rich dad to his poor dad, all of a sudden everything that poor dad said, I'm like, that's kind of how my father viewed things. So one thing that really I took from that book was real estate was a good way to get into the game. All right, so I decided, hey, I'm in the military. While I'm in the military, I'll be moving every 2 to 3 years. And if I'm going to move every 2 to 3 years, I might as well buy a house every time I move. All right, so 2006, I moved to San Diego. Horrible time to buy in San Diego, and fortunately, I recognized that. And so I bought a house in my hometown. So I made the goal after reading that book that I would buy a single family house every year, or try to buy a single family house every year. And the idea was just, you get somebody else to pay down your loan, you get a little bit of cash flow coming in, you get the value of leverage and appreciation and all the wonderful things that real estate brings. If I could just rinse and repeat that everywhere I moved, then, however long I stayed in the military, if it was a 20-year career, I'd end up with 6 or 8 houses to basically fall back on. So, it didn't work out in San Diego the first year because it was just way too expensive. Like I said, fortunately, I saw clearly enough at the time to buy somewhere else. After the market crashed, I bought a second house in San Diego this time, at a substantially reduced price. That's basically how I started. The financial markets tightened. Getting credit, getting loans was a lot more difficult. And so I ended up, settling with just 2 houses. When I went to buy my third house, I called 2 banks, and they're the 2 banks that I had bank accounts with. And I asked them both for a loan. Both banks told me no. And at the time I'm like, all right, guess I'll put this on hold for a little bit. So that's what got me into it. Part of me wishes that, back in 2009, 2010 timeframe when I called those banks up and they said, "Hey, not now," I would have kept on pressing. But not quite how it worked out. You can't change that. Anyway, fast forward several years later, I start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel for my Marine Corps career. I hit my 19-year active duty mark in about a month. And so my time in the military is winding down, and I kind of realized that, if I didn't do anything, if I didn't start planning for the, post-retirement, post-Marine Corps, that I'd ended up doing just a regular job like everyone else. And that's not what I wanted to do. So anyway, long story short, I decided to get back into the real estate game, something that always fascinated me. I've always read about, and I always intended on doing more of. But what really piqued my interest was reading books and listening to podcasts about multifamily, and so that was kind of the idea, hey, I can scale faster. I can, I can scale faster. I can get to my goal quicker, by, buying 10 units at a time instead of, 1 unit per year or 1 house per year for 10 straight years. So yeah, that's what got me interested. That's what got me in. Right now we've got 3 different apartment buildings, all in South Carolina. We have 1 more under contract. We're assuming a loan. We're just waiting for Freddie Mac to say, we're good to assume, and then we'll have another 80. And right before all the movement restrictions came down, we had another LOI signed on another 152 units in Columbia. And 80 units in Clemson, South Carolina. So, South Carolina is where we're at right now. I'm stationed in D.C., but I can get down there frequently. But in general, Southeast U.S. is kind of our turf. Okay.
Well, yeah, that's a great story. I know a lot of people start off in single-family houses, and that is a good starting place for many. But then you saw the ability to scale up by going after apartment buildings. And you've just been building on that. So wonderful. So what I like to focus on in this show is how we manage those properties so that we can really realize the full potential of that investment. And we often need to do this through some intentional business planning, some systems, and some processes. So the first thing I want to ask you about is, when you think about business planning for rental properties, what are some key features of that business plan that come to mind for you?
Some of the key features, we do spend a lot of time and effort looking at the comparables, So, when you look at what makes an apartment work is you've got to be, in line with what's left and right of the property, So, we operate in the value add space. We like to find something that's trailing the market average, whether it hasn't been renovated, whether, it hasn't been managed properly. We try to find something that's trailed in some aspect, and then bring it up to, or maybe a little bit above the average baseline around. So, looking at what our general business plan is, it usually involves a pretty hefty renovation budget. We want the exteriors to look good. We want people's first impression when they drive into a place to put in an application, or not even to put in an application, just to view an apartment. They drive into the place and they look at it, and it's been well maintained. So far everything that we've purchased, we've come in with a budget to, reseal the parking lot, because that's something that immediately, people realize. I mean, consciously or subconsciously, a brand new parking lot looks a lot better than one full of potholes. We just finished painting and wrapping, one of the buildings, the windows in the buildings, and painting all the trim. And, before and after pictures look, a lot different. And we're working on, siding on another building. So when you look at our plan, we're looking at, what do we need to do to make this place appealing for potential renters, all within the local area, without going above and beyond what's the local area. I mean, if you're in a C-class area and you put in A-class, features, it's just not going to work. So I think the biggest thing in our business plan is, working a budget for renovations. How much are these renovations going to cost us? And on the backside, what can we expect in rent growth after we've done this?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Understanding your customer base is really important for any business, and that goes exactly for multifamily as well. And I think that's overlooked quite a bit because people just assume, well, the renters are who they are, they're just going to come. But, if you're providing a product that, matches one demographic and that's not the demographic that is naturally occurring in your geography, then you might not have a good fit there.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. I mean, people, birds of a feather flock together. It's very cliche to say it, but it's true. You go to some neighborhoods and, everything looks the same. I mean, you peel away the veneer, but the people are very similar, So, so we're very careful on that one. We do check out the comps. We do sometimes secret shop. And sometimes we'll call other apartments and just, be blunt and honest. Like, hey, we're looking at buying, this apartment building down the road from you. What do you guys think about that apartment building? Things like that. And, we will, if we can get them talking, we'll ask, lots of questions about the area just from their perspective, because they're there every day. And, I'm coming in from DC. We put a lot of effort into understanding these areas, but we're not there 24/7.
Yep.
So anyway.
I like that strategy too. I mean, that's a great way to find other opportunities, or even just to create some camaraderie with your, fellow business operators in that location. Yeah.
And something else that we're also doing is we're in a way we're interviewing for, our property manager. So, we only have three units right now. One's in Columbia, and two are in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And just because of the size, we have different property managers for each one. And the next one we pick up is far enough away from these two that the same property manager is not going to work it. So, so far everything we've purchased, we've had to have different management companies. So there's an interview process in getting that manager there. And, we'll call neighboring apartment communities, see who manages them. We'll also talk with the current managers. I mean, the least disruptive thing for the tenants is to keep the same property manager, so that's, if it is, fairly well managed, then that's always an option for us, is to keep the current manager on board. So if the current manager matches, what we're looking for, when their ideology matches what we're trying to do, that's going to be top of our list almost every time.
Okay. Well, that's a topic I want to dive into a little bit more with the relationship with your property manager. But before we do, let's go back a little bit to the topic of budgeting. And I think that's where a lot of people can get it wrong. because there's so many unknowns, and especially if you're in a new market dealing with new contractors, new relationships, it can be hard to know who to trust. It can be hard to know, again, what level of finishes to make, and then if those prices are reasonable for that marketplace. So how do you approach that budgeting aspect to make sure you're making realistic expectations there?
We're always sharpening our pencil. I mean, when we underwrite a deal, we probably underwrite, a dozen, maybe 15 deals for every offer that we put in. But when we're underwriting a deal, we're just looking at, what averages are, and we've been underwriting enough and talking to enough contractors that we have an idea, of how much, $5,000 per unit buys, how much $10,000 per unit buys on interiors. And we've got enough quotes on exteriors and roofs to know, give us kind of a ballpark, So, when we put the LOI in, we're happy with a ballpark number, So, we'll add, a little buffer on our numbers when we put the LOI in, and at every step in the process, we're taking it to the next level. Okay, so, LOIs, are non-binding. And as long as we're not putting hard money down, which we've not done yet, as long as we're not having to put hard money down, we're happy going in and during the due diligence period, bringing in a bunch of these contractors, and contractors are a little more willing to give you estimates if it's more likely they're going to get a job out of it. If you're calling a contractor up and saying, hey, I'm thinking of buying this apartment, that's one thing. If you call somebody up and say, hey, we've got this place under contract. Okay, we're going to close in about 60 to 90 days. We want you to come in and give us an estimate. And at that point, we'll bring several people in to give estimates of work on various aspects of the apartments. Somebody for the siding, maybe somebody for the roofs. If one company can do both, that's even better. Landscaping, the internal repairs that we're doing, so we just get various professionals to come in and give us estimates and multiple estimates on different aspects of the work. So after all that, we look at everything that comes in, and sometimes there's a wide range. I remember one roofing job that we had quoted. The lowest quote we got was $64,000. The highest quote we had was $210.
Wow.
And so it was just like, okay, what's going on here? But, when you have a range of quotes, most times things are a little bit tighter, so, the shot group, that's a military term for how close you are to your, how close each round impact is.
Okay.
Usually your shot group is a lot tighter, so all your estimates are in the same range. But yeah, basically, we start with a vague idea based on experience. And then we're refining as we go on.
Okay. Yeah, and then, after you have acquired the property and you're starting to implement that value add, how do you manage that process with the contractors and make sure, of course, they do a good job, the quality is there, and that they stay on target with the time frame that's expected, and stay in budget?
Most of that, is property managers. So for example, we have a 32 unit in Columbia, which we're renovating extensively, and we've worked hand in hand with the property manager on the whole thing. They are getting an extra cut for everything they do. They tack on 10% for every outside contractor that comes in and does work. So we'll leverage the property manager as much as possible. So we'll come to the table at closing with a couple of quotes, and then we'll say, hey, property manager, here are the quotes we got pre-closing. And in most cases, we selected a property manager prior to, and a lot of these quotes have been done with the property manager. But we will sit down with the property manager and say, here's the work we want to do. Here's our budget. Let's work this out. And if we'll leverage their contacts as well and just say, hey, if there's anybody else that can be competitive on these, let's get them into the property as well, and maybe give us one more data point. But yeah, we work with the property managers very closely. We make sure they understand what we're looking for. We make sure that the contractors understand what we're looking for. And once we've worked through the property manager to figure out what vendors or contractors we want to use, we'll generally get on the phone ourselves with the contractor just to make sure that there's nothing lost in translation with the middleman. And then the other thing that we do, for example, one of my partners, Todd, sent me a video this morning. He's out there checking up on the progress. We can't be there every day, so we do have to rely on the property manager to do a lot of it. But we probably get down between the four of us in Four Oaks Capital. We average about once a month visiting every one of our apartments. In hindsight, we could be a little more deliberate in planning that, but a lot of it's just, well, I'm going down there for this anyway, or we have a due diligence trip scheduled, so we'll visit our other apartments. But it's a combination of property management and then making deliberate trips down there just to check up on things.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's talk now about that property management relationship. Some people choose to manage properties themselves. Some people will kind of build a property management company within their investment company. And obviously there's the third party management option. And it sounds like that's what you have gone with. Was that kind of a no-brainer from the start, or how did you make that decision?
Well, because of our situation, it ended up being the only choice, that made sense. I live in the DC area. I've got about, a year and a couple of months left in my active duty, career. So I can't personally manage. My wife is from Columbia, and we have, friends and family. So we're going down there a lot anyway. One of my partners lives in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. One of my partners lives in Wilmington, but he was born and raised in Columbia. One of my partners is in New Jersey right now. So self-managing is not an option because of where we're at. Doing it in-house, there's a lot of, look out. You've been a property manager before. There's certifications. Yep. There's, knowing the law is, there's lots of risk involved to doing that yourself. So just to avoid the risk, we decided, third property is the way to go. Now, as we scale, we're probably first going to bring in, an asset manager, somebody who can do that for us and just manage the managers. But, looking at our long-term vision, I think by the time we get to, 1,500, 2,000 units, we're probably going to have somebody in-house managing it ourselves.
Okay.
And then one more point is, we're also looking, right now, we have a total of 88 units. We've got, a 40-unit complex, a 30-unit complex, and a 16-unit complex. Numbers are at, estimates, so it's not going to add up to 88. But, none of those are large enough for on-site property managers.
Okay.
So you have to have, a company that has, local reach out. Once you get into the 100-plus space, and it makes sense to have on-site property manager, then you can hire somebody to do the day-to-day stuff for you and manage it from off-site. But that's a luxury right now we don't have. Everything we purchase from here on out, we're looking at the on-site model. So I think our purchasing criteria is now 80 units and above, which is right about the point to where on-site property management becomes affordable.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously you and I might know some of this without saying it, but just for the whole discussion purposes, what are some of the benefits of having on-site management versus kind of a local manager that does that from off-site?
On-site manager is always there. The off-site, managers aren't going to give you, 100% attention. So you have one person there who is, dedicated 100% of their working hours to your property. Typically, the first hire is like an office manager or a leasing agent, and your second hire is going to be a part-time maintenance person. So, you are paying their salaries, but they're keeping the place in better condition, and they're a little more responsive to what the residents need. If the residents need something, they can make a phone call, they can put something in the portal, or they can walk down and talk to a living, breathing human being, and response times with somebody on site for maintenance are a lot faster, So if you compare and contrast, making the phone call to a property manager whose office is, 5 or 8 miles away, and waiting for them to schedule something to come in versus on-site maintenance guy. I mean, you could get, same day service, next day service on a lot of even the minor repairs. And I think the costs, once you get to about the 100 unit range, the cost of payroll and everything start actually being more efficient than doing it from offsite, because the maintenance person, you're not paying for overhead for somebody else to come in and do it. You're not paying for their hours. You're already paying for the hourly wage through your payroll. And so it's just different buckets. You're paying a little bit more on payroll, and you end up paying a little less on your overall maintenance costs because the labor is already included.
Yep. Yeah, and as you mentioned, I used to be a property manager. I was in the scattered site model, so probably similar to what you have now, where we have an office, but we're taking care of properties that are all over the metro. And if you're in a large metro, it can be done, but you're pulled in many different directions. So you have to prioritize things that are urgent over things that can wait. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the mistakes I made early on with one of my single family homes is, I went with a property manager that wasn't close to the property. It was kind of on the fringe of their area, and it was a single family home, so, getting them to drive out there, they were very reluctant to do it, and whereas something that's, a couple of miles away, and that is something that we look at when it's offsite, is where is their office with respect to, the actual asset, so we have 2 units in Spartanburg, South Carolina. They're about 2 miles apart from each other. And the property manager that we have right now is literally in between both of them. You have to pass the property manager, the most direct route, you pass the property manager's office getting there. So they're about a mile from each one, and they end up being, pretty responsive when tenants call. So that's definitely one thing that we look at is, where are these guys in location to our asset?
Yeah. Now, you mentioned interviewing a number of different property management companies. What were some of the other key things that you looked for to make sure it was a good fit, aside from the location, and just things that you looked for either in the company as a whole or even the personality of the managers themselves?
We do look at the personalities of the managers. We're going to look at kind of what their portfolio size is, what their experience level is, how long they've been in the job. And, when we look at comps, we're also going to look at some of the things that they manage. So we're going to just drive through, hey, what else do you manage that's close by to this area? And we'll drive through. Does it look like it's well managed? And sometimes we'll secret shop those as well. We'll put a call into their management at a different apartment building. Maybe we'll do a Facebook marketplace.
Oh, okay.
So we'll send them a Facebook message, see how long it takes them to respond, or we'll put in, an inquiry on one of the ads we see and see how long it takes them to respond. So, responsiveness is huge. So it's and that's something we're learning. It's not something we did up front, but it's something that we're learning, based off our experience with our property managers right now. There's kind of a process in getting tenants into leases, and it's advertising, it's bringing the leads in, it's following up on the leads, and there's several points in that process. So we'll try to test different points in that process with that property manager. Sometimes it's like I said, it's secret shopping. So and then when we have them on the phone, I like just to get to know them first, just talk anything but management up front, just to see where they come from, try to build a little bit of a relationship, because, end of the day, we want them to like us. If they like us, they're going to be more willing to work with us and work for us. And I've been told by people that I can sometimes, come across as being rude. That's kind of the Marine in me, a little direct, but, so sometimes I let my partners, handle the communications with property managers. But yeah, end of the day, we're looking at their performance. We're looking at their experience and track record. We're also asking people for references, so one thing we've tried to do is, all of our third party vendors, so our insurance broker, the guy who's working our loans for us, we're trying to get people that are in the same area that we're focused on, which is upstate South Carolina. So we're working with Align Capital in Greenville. We're working with Assured Partners for insurance out of Greenville, South Carolina. And we're working with the same brokerages that have local offices there. And it's an area where, we can ask these other professionals for references. Hey, how do these guys do? What do you think about these guys? So that's part of the vetting process as well, is just to see what reputation they have among the other professionals in the area. And I think we're working hard to build, relationships with lots of different people there. And the same goes across, when we were looking for a new insurance guy, the same thing happened. We asked our, the other people we knew in the area, hey, who does insurance in this area? Who can you introduce us to that can help us with A, B, or C? So that's part of the process when vetting property managers, is just, talking to people. Hey, how well do these guys do? What is their reputation?
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, if you can get some honest conversations going with other people in the marketplace, they'll give you the feedback that you need. And also, like you talked about, shopping the other available rentals, seeing what the response time is. I like that a lot. I think that will be very telling for other management companies out there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that, it's one of those things when you're under a microscope, when you're being evaluated, you act differently. And I was actually listening to another episode of your podcast the other day and pulled some gems out of that too. But along the same lines, show up unannounced, and see what's going on. I think that's what your guest in your last episode said, and it's something that I just added to our list of things to do. Show up unannounced every once in a while and see how things are moving. So,
yep.
Yeah.
So, how have you set up your routine interactions with the management company so that, are there certain key performance indicators that you review on a monthly basis, or how does that look like on the ongoing management?
There are weekly performance indicators and there's monthly performance indicators. Depending on different cycles. Obviously your rent collections are better on a monthly basis because that's when rent's collected. Incidentally, we're at about 95% collection rate for April, even with the COVID. So, we do weekly calls with them, and there's a spreadsheet that we bounce back and forth. They felt we moved it to Google Sheets so it's just a little more streamlined. But, things we're looking at is, I think our biggest performance indicator is what our occupancy level is. Where is occupancy right now? And then looking at the things that are tied to occupancy, we're also looking at turn time. So on this spreadsheet we have, when did the tenants give notice? All right. And then after the notice period, when was the inspection? When was the move out? When was the apartment pre-listed? When was, the apartment ready? So we're tracking time from beginning to end. That's one of the those are just some of the indicators that we look at, just trying to streamline the process. We're also looking at, where leads are coming from and, how many leads it takes to turn into a lease.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a really great things to make sure you're staying full at your rental property. Are there other areas like, again, going back to the kind of maintenance or other expenses or anything else that you're kind of tracking on a routine basis?
Oh, yeah. On a routine basis, we've also have, our capital expense budget that we're tracking, any given time, we've got several projects going on. So, When we start a project, we have an estimated completion date, and we're tracking, what is that completion date? What is the progress on there? And then on a weekly basis, we're tracking expenses, so, every week they have, here's where we are on collections so far this month to date. Here's where we are on expenses month to date, and, our criteria is we want all of our, managed expenses, the expenses that come out on our property management sheet to be below, a certain threshold per unit, so we have a per unit threshold that, this is our goal and where we're going to keep our expenses. And so far our property managers have been very good at keeping the expenses low for us. So that's, if your eyes on it continually, it's something that's going to improve.
Yeah. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing this, but what is an example of the threshold of expenses that's acceptable to you?
So I'll give you kind of more of the process. Because the expenses are going to vary by region, but we do a combination of we look at the previous owner. What was their average monthly expense per unit, and then we look at the budget when we do our underwriting, our pro forma. We look at that. So. And then based off of the information we have, based off how we think we can manage the property and how the previous property manager managed the property, we set a goal. We set a target for where we want to be under, that's essentially how we get to it. Right now, off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly what the number is per property, but each property is a little different because there's different expenses involved. Some properties have active security. Monitoring systems, some properties have, certain contracts that others don't, so, we don't have an across the board number. We just do it individually for each property because of the differences between, different properties.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. One of the other key aspects of running a rental business is making sure you're taking care of your customers, the tenants. And we talked about that earlier when kind of knowing who the customer base is and attracting the right customers. How do you then go on an ongoing basis to kind of create a culture of customer service and make sure that, tenants are satisfied and they're even excited about living at the property to the point they are telling their friends about it?
One thing that we mentioned already is just like we want the property to look nice, so, when we take over a property, we'll generally have our property manager do a tenant survey, and we go in with an idea of what we want to do, but then we'll put these things on a survey and just say, hey, if the new ownership could fix one thing at this property, what would you want it to be? And just to see what they come up with. Sometimes it's a multiple choice, but I think that's one thing that we do. And then when they see stuff actually happening, that's kind of a key indicator to them that, we are trying to make the place nicer, so, we try to make sure that our property managers communicating with them. Right now with our COVID response, we're looking at, potentially just sending each one of our residents a small gift card, not enough to make a difference, but enough just to say, hey, look, we are thinking about you. We're, we understand these might be hard times. Here's a little token of what we can do. So I think just making sure that our property manager is responsive, make sure that we have kind of a little litmus test of what's going on there, what they need. And then, just walking around and asking, so, for example, we were at one apartment one day and, a 20-something-year-old, woman was out walking her dog, and we just started talking to her. And in that conversation, she mentioned that the washers and dryers never work. Well, we ended up getting a contract with a company shortly thereafter to put washers and dryers in there instead of using our own. So they're going to take care of the maintenance, they're going to take care of everything else, and send us a check at the end of the month for whatever income they they received over their expense. So, it's just one of those things where you try to be responsive, you try to have dialogue, and you try to listen. And then, we're also offering, concessions or concessions to current residents if they refer their friends. So I think what we're doing at one property is a $200 concession if they refer somebody who signs a lease, and that's taken in reduced rent, $100 for the next 2 months or $200 in 1 month, whatever they want to do.
Yeah, those are some great ideas. And I like the idea of being actively engaging with the tenants through a survey or through those one-on-one conversations. So many times tenants might notice something with the property but not report it, like the laundry issue. They just think somebody else probably already did it. Management probably already knows about it. It's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
But,
and I don't know. I mean, some tenants, when they know you're part of the ownership group, some tenants are just going to clam up and not say anything. And other tenants are just going to, air all the dirty laundry. Hey, well, 6 years ago, the management said they did this. And then 3 years ago, they said, so yeah, whenever possible, we try to keep that line open. One apartment that we bought, the biggest complaint, for example, was there wasn't enough parking. And we realized this going in. There's 40 units in the building. There's 25 parking spots. So, and there's plenty of land to put parking in. So, small wonder when we put in the survey in, the number one response was we need more parking spots. Fortunately, it's something we budgeted to. The weather and actually the coronavirus right now is delaying that, but it's something that we're going to end up putting in, and hopefully that puts a message across to every resident in the building that number one, they all saw the survey. The overwhelming majority said we need better parking, and when we come through with better parking at the end of the day, it's going to be like, hey, they're listening to us and they're actually putting money into this place.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. So obviously, when you're in real estate investing, there's lots of benefits. You can have some passive income, although as a active owner, syndicator, there's lots of responsibilities there still. But what are some of the difficulties you've run into? Maybe something that's unexpected, that was challenging, and how did you learn from it?
Unexpected. There's a couple of things, and just budgeting, and what are the additional expenses, and that's something that I think, we probably could have done a little better, and maybe we just didn't know. For example, we get a quote to paint a building for X, and then once they come in, the number almost doubles because of, hey, there's, we've got to replace wood here, we've got to replace wood there. The parking lot that I was just speaking about, we had a quote to replace it, and it wasn't a small number. I mean, it was resealing a parking lot and then building more parking. But turns out we have to have some architectural drawings on it done, so, the quote we had was from the people who were actually putting the asphalt down, and this is how much it's going to cost to put the asphalt down. But they didn't include, the permits and everything else. So, a lot of it's, just, learning from experience, and, now we're realizing that, we've heard this a million times before from experienced syndicators. If you think you're going to spend X, add 10% to that, raise that amount of money, because there are going to be overages here and there and just about everywhere, so, being flexible with the budget is something that, we've learned we have to do. And, I think as we get better at this, we're going to be able to ask better questions, with the contractors, what items are going to lead to this quote, getting bigger, what things are there out there that can turn this $30,000 quote into a $50,000 job, and just starting that dialogue with them. And then, if there's any red flags, maybe we get them back out again and just say, hey, can you take another look and, revise your estimate based off of the condition, because I'm going to budget 30,000. And if it comes back at 50, I'm going to be really mad, regardless of whether it needed it or not. I want you to go out and we'd have that conversation. We're having that conversation a little more bluntly with the contractors. And it's just, hey, I want to know now, if you're saying you're going to have to potentially replace, some soffit or potentially replace, some of the paneling, why don't you go look at that right now? Why don't you walk around the buildings, look at the soffit, look at the paneling, and come back to me and say, this is how much I think I'm going to need to replace, and revise your estimate. So anyway, a lot of it's just, learning from the mistakes that you've made, learning from the places that you have under budgeted, and fortunately, we've kept enough, buffers in there that we've been able to absorb these things on the fly. But, that I think that's probably it.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. I know it reminds me of a time I replaced a roof on my fourplex. I was planning just to remove and replace that flat rubber roof. But of course, you didn't think about, well, the decking wasn't great. And then once you tear off the decking, well, the insulation isn't great. And, the wrapping on the sides. So there's so many contingencies that if you just knew what questions to ask, you could get the contractor at least gives you those contingency line items ahead of time up front.
Yeah, and funny that you mentioned roofs. I told you up front the difference between quotes on one single roof was from 64 to 210,000. The 210,000 quote, we actually asked them to quote us worst case scenario, and their worst case scenario was replacing all the paneling underneath and the insulation as well. So I mean, there was a story behind that one that I didn't say earlier, but that's exactly what it was. If everything's perfect and all we're doing is resealing it, you're gonna have a $60,000 bill. But if we get in and realize that we've got to replace paneling, we've got to replace all the flashings and everything else, here's what the bill's gonna look like at the end.
Yep.
But ideally, the number in the beginning and the number at the end match, but obviously we realize that contractors aren't going to work at a loss. If they have a $30,000 contract and their expenses are going to be 50, they're not going to work it. So it ends up being more of a conversation piece up front right now than it was before, and hopefully that avoids some of the, over budget items later.
Yep. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be in that position where you're mid-project and then they say, well, to finish this the right way, we got to add on $20,000.
Yeah. And coming up with $20,000 in some cases, it's like, well, where's that coming from? Well, maybe we won't do X, or maybe we won't do Y, or we'll have to trim, so at some point, you're going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul on the budget items.
Yep. Now, I want to go kind of backwards a little bit in the conversation towards that role with working with the property manager. And obviously, the manager is going to do a lot of the day-to-day operations for you. But you want to have input as the business owner. And so how do you balance that of, letting them do what they do, that's their expertise, versus, having some input, having even some control over the way that your properties are run?
With a beginning relationship, and we've told this to everybody who's managed with us, up front, we're going to ask for a lot of information, just a whole lot of information. We're going to ask why a whole bunch, just to make sure that we're getting, the right service, So, one example, we got a quote in for a renovation. This is a building downtown Spartanburg, and it was, I think $1,800 to put tiling on the kitchen. It's just like, that's a ridiculous number. I'm like, I can put LVP in 900 square feet for that price. So why are we paying $2,000 to tile a 100 square foot kitchen? And we send them, we make them answer the questions and come back. So and it's kind of a hard process to navigate because, a lot of property managers don't want to have to answer all of those questions, but, so, this is where, somebody with a little more finesse than me has to go in and ask the questions. I'm great to point it out to my partners, but end of the day, we're looking for kind of the whys behind decisions. We give them, a certain amount of leeway up front. There's always anything up to this threshold you can do without our approval. Anything above this threshold, you need to talk to us. So when things come, when they send us the estimates for things above the threshold, we're going to ask, number one, why, and number two, we're also going to ask, what they have done to make sure we're getting, the best bang for a buck, the best value for the price tag that's going to get, So, and then if they can't answer that question up front, we make them dig a little more, and honestly, that has created friction in the past because, they're busy and they don't want to dig, but, at the same time, we need to make sure that, we're getting the best value and we're not just getting the easy answer. Once again, it's something that takes a little more finesse than I have. I'm a little more direct, and that's why we partner with people. That's why we partner with people who can handle that situation a little better.
Yep. Well, that makes sense. Setting those expectations up front, I think, is really important. That you're going to be asking why, so that they don't take offense. It's not that you're second guessing them. It's just you need to understand, and you need to know that it's a thought through process.
Yeah. And end of the day, I mean, we're in it together. They're going to get a certain percentage, but if we can increase revenue, their percentage goes up just like our percentage goes up. So we're in it together at the end of the day. The better we do, the better they do. And most property managers understand that. Most property managers understand that a little more effort up front in the renovation process is going to basically translate to increased revenue down the line in the form of rents. If they can get a 10% rent bump for us, they're also getting a 10% increase to their own revenue because, a lot of, well, not the case always, but, a lot of the property managers have a flat percentage plus payroll or just a flat percentage that they're charging us as owners to manage the property for them. So, anything they do to increase our bottom line is also going to increase their bottom line.
Yep. Very good. And then, so with your military background, are there some disciplines or strategies or systems that you've been able to, cross over and apply to the rental property business?
Systems, yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of the systems don't necessarily translate directly, but something that we do, that there's I'm going to probably attribute this to the wrong general. I want to say it's, actually, I'm not even going to say, but, plan is worth nothing. Planning is everything, So, the more detail we go into planning, the better off we're going to be, because nothing, and another phrase that I can't, attribute the quote to is, every plan, no plan survives first contact, So, in the military, you're going to have a battle plan, whether it's tactical or a strategic plan, but as soon as that first shot's fired, that plan is going to go out the window. Nothing is going to happen exactly like you planned it, but if you've put forth the effort into the planning process, you're able to adjust more quickly and more seamlessly than you would if you didn't put go through the mental gymnastics to get that plan done. So I think that's really kind of the biggest takeaway from the military is, the plan is worth nothing, but the planning process, that's what's worth everything. Because, end of the day, there's, we have a nice little box, that here's what our plan is going in, and so far we're 3 for 3 at not meeting that plan 100%. So we've had to make adjustments on the fly. We've had a couple of expenses that have popped up that we didn't have budgeted, So I'd say that's it. Just planning and planning and planning.
Yep. Wow, I like that. That's good. Speaking about planning, some people go into a rental property with the plan to hold it forever and pass it down to their heirs, generation to generation. Others, obviously, a lot of times in the syndication space, you typically go in with a 5-7 year hold, something like that. How do you approach knowing and planning when's the right time to sell your investment?
So we have a kind of a target that we're advertising to our investors. So if we think we're going to give them a 15% return on their investment, we really want to hit that number. We want to be able to deliver what we've advertised. However, we're also opportunists. So one syndication we advertised a 5 to 8 year hold because that's how long we thought it would take to be able to hit that 15% mark. On a different syndication we did, it was a unit when we purchased it. It was at 60% occupancy. And we figured that within 2 years we could probably meet the business plan and work it out. But we are opportunists. If the market is really hot in 3 or 4 years, and we have a 5 to 8 year hold, if we can meet that 15% average annual return or that 15% IRR that we advertised, or even exceed it by selling it early, I think that's that we will definitely consider that. It's in our best interest and it's in the investor's best interest as well. So we advertise. Each deal is a little different. I know there's some really big syndicators that say, hey, I do every deal like X. The splits are always the same every time I do everything. I don't think you can apply the same template to every apartment community. So we'll look at everything on its merits and we'll say, okay, in order for us to maximize our returns to investors, here's the anticipated hold time. But we also tell the investors that, this is how long we expect the hold time to be. But if the market conditions are such that we can exceed this number prior to, yes, we will seek to sell it. Or, we also, one thing we don't plan refinances in our numbers, because, I'm a math guy. I've got 2 degrees in math. I was working on a PhD. You can artificially inflate your returns by fudging your refinance numbers just a little bit. You can take something from average returns of 15% to 20%. And that artificially inflates your numbers. So we don't put a refinance in the numbers, but if 1, 2, 3 years after purchasing a property, it looks like we can refinance, do a cash out refinance and return investor capital, we'll also do that. So end of the day, same philosophy applies. We have a plan, but we've also looked, and this is a very, very military term, at all the branches and sequels. What happens if X, what happens if Y, and we continue each one of these thought processes down to fruition. So end of the day, we've done a lot of the mental homework. We've done a lot of the analysis, and we've got a lot of what ifs planned. And we're opportunists. If the market looks great in 3 years and we can refinance and return a boatload of capital, we'll do that. If this COVID depression lasts longer than we had anticipated, we may have to extend things out, instead of the 5 year mark, maybe the 6, 7, or 8 year mark. But on the flip side, we're also communicating any changes to our investors as quickly as we can. Yep.
Well, that makes sense. As I'm looking at this decision, not for me personally, just that people are making, I think that seems to be the case for most syndicators. Do you think your outlook on that will be different if it was all your own capital? I mean, is there any downside to selling early versus holding it for that 30 years or 60 years or whatever it might be?
I would say it has to be tied to your goals. So if it was my personal, money or folks' capital, and incidentally, there is one investment we have where we own 100% of it. It really depends on what our goals are. So when you're syndicating, you have to find kind of a happy medium that allows you to bring in enough money. But our goals as the four principles of Four Oaks Capital is, we're looking to cash flow. We're looking to have, to generate passive income for the long term. So, end of the day, what's going to drive, our business is what can we do to increase our passive, our annual passive cash flow. However, when we're looking at investors, we do quite a bit to try to keep a pulse on what people are looking for. What hold times are too much, too long, what hold times are too short, and what their general expectations are. So, looking, when to sell. We try, and this may not be where you're getting, but we try to make sure that the deal is structured so that our interests on each particular deal are aligned with our investor interests, so that there's never a question between, well, if we do X, it's going to benefit us, but not so much our investors. And if we do Y, it's going to be the opposite. So, really, long answer to a short question is it really depends on what the goals are, So our goal is cash flow, and our long-term, 5, 8, 10 years, we're looking at each deal and saying, okay, number one, we have to meet investor criteria, but is this going to contribute to our long-term goal of increasing our passive income?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, everybody needs to take that time at the beginning of their investing career and figure out what their goals are, and then kind of reassess them as time goes on, because obviously goals can change.
Yeah.
But that's really important. Well, listen, Brian, we've gone kind of long here, and I appreciate all the insight you've shared. I do have some final questions, but before that, any final thoughts on just the business planning, business systems that we've discussed so far?
Yeah, I'd be kind of ungrateful if I didn't acknowledge some people in this one. I didn't come up with everything myself. I had a mentor that really helped me through the process. Josh Eidingen's his name. It was through the Michael Blanc mentorship program. So going in, I realized that one thing that we didn't have was experience. And so we tried to do everything we could to get the experience. The experienced outlook on things. So I paid for Michael Blanc mentorship. And, Josh Eidingen was key in helping us to bring these systems up. And then one of my partners, Todd Butler, was also in the Michael Blanc program, and his coach was Drew Whitson. And I think Drew.
Yeah.
And Drew partnered with us on some of these. And, he's a resource that we go back to over and over and over again. Probably not enough, to be honest with you, but, I would say that, most of the success we have had has been because we have reached out to other people who are successful and have learned from their lessons prior to learning lessons, on our own.
Yep. No, that's really great. A lot of people try to go it alone. I think that's been, for me, one of the things that slowed me down is I'm kind of an independent-minded person, and I like to start my own thing, do my own thing, but there's a lot of value in learning from others and partnering with others.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree.
That's great. Well, like I mentioned, I've got some closing questions here. So number one is, why do you get up in the morning?
Why do I get up in the morning? Well, I've got 5 kids, so even if I don't want to get up in the morning, the noise level gets to a certain point to where it's bad. But, at the end of the day, I want to provide a lifestyle, for my kids, for my family. The military has been a very stable income, but it's also taken me away from my family more than I want. So, I think the better question is, why am I doing what I'm doing right now with real estate? Which drives me to get up in the morning. And that's to be able to be with my family, to have, the best of both worlds. The income I make right now, as a Marine officer is good. But on the flip side, my schedule changes, weekly, I can get told tomorrow that I'm going to be gone for the next year, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm doing this so that, my younger kids don't have to go to 10 different schools before they graduate.
Yeah, that's great. And then the next question, you may have already answered this in your previous statement, but what's a person or event in your history that's been monumental in creating who you are today?
Wow. Restricting it to kind of the real estate. Actually, I would say the most significant event was probably a 2-year event. I served a mission for my church when I was, 19 to 21 years old. And I think that's just kind of shaped who I am in my thinking more than in any other period of my life. I thought I was poor growing up, until I spent 2 years in South America, and, I came back grateful for the upbringing that I had. As I mentioned earlier, we weren't rich, but we had all of our basic needs met. We never had to wonder if we were going to eat tomorrow, so I think that's just kind of framed everything else and given me, a much different outlook on life and the blessings we have just being born in the United States of America. There was this, 99% to 1% movement that was going on in the U.S., which I thought was laughable because anybody born in the U.S. is already in the 1% of the world.
Yeah.
So, I'd say, 2-year mission for my church.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that answer as well. Just last night, I was reading to my girls, my 2 oldest girls, some information from another country about how their situation is during this COVID-19, and it's drastically different. I mean, we think we have it bad because we're locked in our houses or whatever it might be, but it's nothing compared to some of these other places in the world that they're told to stay home, but that means they don't have any food.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it comes between a choice of food or obeying what the government tells you to do, everybody's going to choose food, my day job with the Marine Corps, I'm a foreign area officer, so Latin America is what I'm interested in for my day job. Incidentally, that's, where I served my mission and where I started really, kind of falling in love with that region. But, there's countries there that don't have the medical capabilities to respond, so they don't have the, the institutions to the point to where they can actually, come up with a coherent plan. And I mean, COVID is basically going to be tearing through these nations, and we're not going to see the numbers because they also don't have the ability to test. So they're not going to come up with big numbers saying this is how many people are infected, this is how many people died, because they just don't have the capability to track that. And so diseases like COVID, we have a response here, and our numbers look very, poor compared to the rest of the world. When you put it into the context of saying, places like Bolivia and Venezuela just don't have the capability to even test people, it makes our numbers, not so bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to add another question just because I see that sign behind you, and I can only see the bottom. It says the most important word.
There you go.
Okay.
Ever.
Hustle.
Verb. The most important word ever.
Okay. Is there any story behind that, or why does that mean so much to you?
Our SEC attorney sent that to me, and it was just one of those things where, I get this big package in the mail. I sent him a text, on New Year's Day, and I said, our goal for 2020 is to pay our SEC attorney $100,000 this year, and it was just one of those things where, a little while later I got the sign from him, but, he's been with us. He's been, somebody that we've been able to, build a relationship with, and he's been solidly in our corner. And I think, we've had a lot of hangups in the acquisition process, and we've been able to get through them all so far. And, at the end of, closing on our, first property, there was a lot of hangups. He basically sent us a note and said, hey, I was very impressed by 2 things from your group. That's number 1, the amount of hustle you guys put in, and number 2, your grit. So a little while later, I get the sign in there. I'm like, well, you know what? I took, 4 or 5 things down that are, actually in that little corner down there just to put that sign up.
Neat.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, as we wrap things up here, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they'd like to learn more about your business?
The website is fouroakscapital.com, all spelled out, no punctuation, fouroakscapital.com. My email address is my first name and my last name all together. Once again, no punctuation, so Brian Briscoe at fouroakscapital.com.
All right, very good. Well, Brian, again, I appreciate your time to be with us today, share your insights into managing our rental portfolio so that we can achieve the greatest success possible. I also appreciate the service that you have put in for our country. And with that, I wish you well, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot, John. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all you do for people trying to learn more about this business.
Wonderful. And briefly to our audience, thank you for listening or for watching this episode. If you got anything out of it, be sure to let us know. The best way to do that is either on a comment on the YouTube video or by going ahead to Apple Podcasts and giving us a rating and review so that other people can learn more about it. And thank you so much. We will see you on the next episode. Take care.
The opinions shared on this show are for informational purposes only and should not be taken as a solicitation for representation or investment in any specific offering. Please consult with your financial, legal, tax, and real estate advisor before making any investment decisions. John Stiles is a licensed Minnesota real estate agent with Bridge Realty.
Thanks for tuning in to Maximizing Your Property Value, the apartment owner's guide to operating rental properties as a successful business. If you're considering scaling up, downsizing, or right-sizing your real estate investment portfolio, it's important to know how to determine your property's value in today's market. That's why I've put together a free ebook for you called How to Calculate Your Investment Property's Value. To get your copy, go to www.realestatestyles.com/value. Now, if you found any value in today's show, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter, YouTube channel, and podcast through your favorite podcast player. All the links are in the show notes. And would you do me a big favor? Help me get the word out about this show by sharing with your friends on Facebook and LinkedIn. And lastly, we appreciate your 5-star rating on iTunes. I really appreciate you and wish you the best in your real estate investing career. Signing off, I'm John Stiles with Bridge Realty. Make it a great day.